So we're going to be starting in just a couple more minutes. Thank you. Okay, I think everybody is pretty well checked in that's going to be attending this evening. I would like to thank you all for coming to our meeting tonight. It is December 5th, of course, and it's a little after 6:30. Okay, if I can have the agenda, please. So tonight we have the review of the Treasury reports. We're going to go through a couple of community news items, and then we have our guest speaker, Lynn Tipton from FLC University. She's the director there. And then we'll be adjourned after that. But I do want to let you know that our meeting in January will be January 9th, not on the 2nd, which is typically the first Tuesday. We're going to push it back 1 week because of the holiday. Okay, next slide. All right, Mike, our treasurer.
Can everybody hear me?
Come on up.
How about now? Okay, my name's Mike Sweeney. I'm the treasurer for the GPICA. I'm going to very quickly go over this tonight. The money market is $16,764.68. Really insignificant change there. The checking is $8,843.68. That is going to change substantially, about $3,000 less, and I'll tell you the reason for that in a moment. The CD investment has increased in value. The original CD investment, the percentage we were getting was 0.75%. And that was in last April then. We switched it to rolled the CD over, we were actually getting 4.2%, and that 4.2 has garnered us about over $1,000 extra as far as interest goes. And so the current investment is the value is $78,548.43. The cash box is how much money we have in the cash, so if you're thinking about robbing it, it's only $103. And the little stars there indicate that the CD itself will roll over again on July 4th. The interest rate, I just did this on Friday. No, I did it on Monday of this week. And the interest rate is now 4.95. So it should continue to give us a little bit more money. The total money in was $1,046.36, and the breakdown for that was $330 in cash memberships, and then $716.36 in Square memberships, and one couple's lifetime membership, and that's $500. So that's how we arrived at that $1,046. The money out, we spent a total of $336.16 this month. We spent $36.16 for GoDaddy, which is a website maintenance, and we also spent $300 to rent the building this evening, so you won't be evicted. And so the Chiquita Lock Defense Fund, we had originally made a pledge of $2,500, and then on top of that, we got donations from members of totaling $2,975. We said that we would match those, and so we added an additional $2,975 to our original $2,500. And Then we paid our first lawyer bill, and the first lawyer bill was $2,500. So the current value is $5,950 that is in that Chiquita Lock Fund. However, we have paid the lawyer a second time. We sent out a check on Friday, and that is for $3,000. And that's what I was referring to you earlier. I was telling you about how that's going to drop down. The checking is going to drop down, and that's because we're going to be subtracting $3,000 that the lawyer will be when he cashes that check. So the current total, as I said, is $5,950. This bottom part right here, suffice it to say, I'm not going to go through all the detail on it, simply that we have to make up, because we use some of you may have used it this evening, a credit card system, and so there's a charge every time you pay with your credit card for a new membership, et cetera. There's a charge for that, and what we had agreed to do was to, for the people that were contributing with the Chiquita Lock, if they paid with their credit card to donate to that fund, we would reimburse them and make up the difference between what they intended. Let's say they said, I want to pay $50, and it only credited with $48.50, then we'd make up the $1.50. So as of right now, we have to make up $9.53. So that's it. So do you have any questions for me regarding this? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so before we continue and actually ask for a motion, I do want to let you know that we're still accepting donations to go towards the Chiquita Lock legal defense through our matching donations until we reach that threshold. You can still donate if you are a GPICA member through our credit card system online, or if you wanted to write a check, you can hand it to our treasurer. Please just make sure you note on there what it's for if you choose to do that. This will be going towards the Matt Lachey legal defense. We're expecting at least one more bill to come through. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the? Thank you. And Sue is second, and Mike is first. Do I have everybody's approval for the minutes, or for the Treasury report? Thank you. Yes? Aye? Any nays? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. So on the next part is just a real quick request that we're looking for committee members for the developmental committee. You can learn more about that online. There's a lot of activity that goes along our island that's quite a good size. And if we can get enough volunteers, we can keep a better track of what's been happening on the island in the sense of development, any old approval developmental orders that have been revised. It's kind of nice to have the community aware of them, so we're not all as shocked like when Publix showed up. So, next slide, please. And then tomorrow night is the discussion with Lee County. They're going to the Thursday. Thank you very much. So on Thursday, you'll want to go to the Pine Island Elementary School in their community center there, and they'll be discussing and showing all the different ways that they're going to or want to do our four-way stop. And of course, the options are that they're giving us is a traffic circle, stoplights, or leave it alone. And everybody who has an opinion needs to go to that. Otherwise, Lee County will not listen and hear what the community wants. And I believe they even have an other box. You know, if you have another choice or decision or suggestion, you could probably write it in. So, thank you. See you there on Thursday, not tomorrow. Okay, so we're going to be running this meeting just a little bit different. Next slide, please. Please make sure your cell phones are turned off. We're going to take all private conversations outside if you can, please. That way everybody can hear our speaker and any type of questions and answers that may go along with the presentation. During the Q&A, we're going to have the microphone in the back this time, so you don't have to walk all the way up to the microphone. If there happens to be someone already at the microphone, please line up behind them, next to them, or beside them. That way we can keep the line, if there is a line, going pretty quickly and more efficiently. Thank you. And of course, incorporation is a very personal topic on a lot of people. And we want to make sure that we all remain civil, we remain respectful, and we remain cordial. So that's just a friendly reminder. So in the next slide, I would love Miss Lynn Tipton. She's the director of the FLC University, which is the Florida League of Cities Universities of Orlando. Thank you. Welcome.
And it's on. Good evening. Hi. To get to a position, I think I will just, if I can, if it's all right with you, I'll stand here. And who is the Florida League of Cities, and why did this person come down here tonight? We are the statewide association for a city, a town, or a village. The Florida Constitution says that's a municipality. We were created 101 years ago. And at the time, we were the Florida League of Municipalities, but nobody can spell municipality, let alone tell you what one is. So we changed our name in 1970 to the Florida League of Cities. We're one of the oldest and the largest of the associations like us. Everybody but Hawaii has one, because Hawaii only has one city, Honolulu. It functions each island is a county. In case you're ever on Jeopardy, I want you to be ready. And I have been with them for almost 33 years. FLC University is its training arm, and we approach municipal incorporation questions as a fabulous opportunity to do a little bit of civic education, to talk about a process, and we are neutral as to whether you do or you don't. We can point you towards communities that have studied it and walked away. We can point you towards communities that have studied it and incorporated. And all of this is just a wonderful part of democracy in action at the local level. So I'm here to talk a little bit and then answer questions and to talk about things other than incorporation in terms of what other options there might be out there. I very much appreciate the opportunity to come. I was here in 2018, so I'm going to ask, first of all, was anybody here in 2018? Because you're going to hear a little of the same stuff. Is it in a whole new crowd? Nope, one or two? Yes, perfect. A couple of you are. And the other question I always ask is, who's a native Floridian? I don't get to raise my hand, but thank you, congratulations. Most of Florida is non-native. The current stat, if you want to know, 65% of us like me moved here from somewhere else and 35% is native. How many of you had a high school civics class? If we all raise our hands with enthusiasm, we can count it as going to the gym. So let's go, right? Okay, keep your hands up. In your high school civics class, did it include an explanation of local government? And some of the hands will come down, right? But some of them did stay up, so fabulous, right? Fabulous. Not every civics class covers that. Most of us are lucky to get the federal government has 3 branches. Your state government has, depending on what state you live in, etc. Well, Florida, the little bit that I need to do civics-wise, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Our Constitution says there are 4 kinds of local government in Florida. And the presentation, if Deborah and Nadine, you guys will make sure this gets posted to your site for anybody that wants to see the slides. I'm already seeing the shaking heads, yes. All right, every inch of Florida is a county. You are sitting in the middle of, let's hear you shout it out, Lee County. Yes, good, you know where you are, I love it. You are sitting in the Lee School District. You are in at least one special district. We all live in a water management district, but there are many more. There are mosquito control districts, inland navigation districts, library districts, fire districts, hospital districts. There are 1,600 special districts, plus or minus, in Florida. Some of them live as short as 3 months. Those are street lighting districts because somebody built a subdivision. didn't put any lights in, had to come back, create a district to do the lighting. Those are the short term, and then some of them live for decades, like in the navigation districts that govern all the intercoastal waterways. Nonetheless, we all live in at least one. So mandatory county, mandatory school district, mandatory special district, and then the Constitution says Florida may have municipalities, not must. Optional. And you may have come from a state like Connecticut or Massachusetts. Anybody in the house? Connecticut, Massachusetts? Every inch of your states is incorporated. You don't have any unincorporated areas. You come down to Florida, and what do they mean unincorporated county? What do you mean? What do I live in? Oh, a place name, a census data point, a community, right? But not a municipality. So depending on where you lived prior to Florida, all of that local government experience comes with you. And then you get here, right? And either election day or a community group like this, a good, strong civic organization starts to throw information at you, and your first immediate response is, we didn't do it that way back home. That's okay. Everybody gets to write their own state constitution, and for Florida, the county is the arm of the state, constitutionally defined as a sub-state. The municipal level, in the optional sense of it, is defined as an independent public corporation. So the people form it, and when we talk about incorporation as a process, I'm going to mention there's 2 tiers to it because the state has to have a small part in it first, but the vote to incorporate comes at home. Half of Florida, currently, 50.3, is incorporated. 49.7 live as you do in unincorporated, okay? And Florida's been about 50-50 since the late 1970s. Why? Not more people in a city? Where do you get your services? What services do you want? That's usually what drives it. Most people do not go to a realtor and say, I'm looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, but I need to be inside a city. They'll say, I like how that looks, or I want to live there, and then find out what it is. We don't usually go shopping that way. So, just looking at my slide, making sure I covered it. We are going to touch a little on home rule. I will say that as a constitutional authority, what happened prior to home rule is Dillon's rule, which a number of US states are still Dillon's rule states. And what that means is a county or a municipality have no authority to adopt any laws whatsoever. They go to the state and they get permission. And they either go one at a time or they go in groups. All cities between 10,000 and 50,000 seek permission to have water and sewer plants. Takes 3 to 5 years, on average, for most of those requests to go through. There are special acts for that legislature to consider. Might be something as innocent as we'd like to have a police department as a city. You don't have the authority locally to do that in a Dillon's rule state. And Dillon was the name of an Iowa judge whose case went all the way to the US Supreme Court, didn't get heard in the late 1800s, but it became the law of the land for those states that didn't address local government authority. Local government authority gets the nickname then of home rule when, like Florida's Constitution in 1968, the voters put a provision in that flipped Dillon's rule. Flipped it in theory. Any county or any municipality may enact any ordinance it wishes, provided that ordinance does not conflict with state or federal law. So Daytona Beach wants to put stop signs up at a corner. After home rule, they don't have to go to the state and get permission. They can do it, okay? However, can they do it on an interstate or regulate an interstate speed? No, that's for the federal government to do. Or if it's a state highway, they'd work with the state on that speed limit. The issue with home rule since about 1995 has been there have been preemptions. And counties and municipalities that had specific authority have seen that authority removed. So when I get back to that a little later, we'll talk about it, but that's essential. So next slide, please. Here's your numbers. We're at 411 on the municipal level. The smallest of those, Marine Land, has 8 people. No zeros, 8. And the largest of those is Jacksonville, at 900 and roughly 90,000. They've already held their party for $1 million, by the way. I don't know who did their count. Not quite there. Probably will be there in this next census, but not yet there. The median in these cities is 6,485, so basically 6,500. We are not a state of big cities. Now, if you're in downtown Tampa, if you're in Miami, if you're in downtown Jacksonville, you can say, yes, this is very urban, feels very urban. Most of Florida is much more suburban, and what's incorporated is heavily suburban. Rural areas do not typically need a municipal authority. Farms in particular, there isn't a municipal service that they need, so you don't tend to see those areas incorporated. Also, for those of you from the New England area, Florida cannot have townships. That is not part of our local government structure. So, just for food for thought. All right, next slide, please. Now, the actual process to incorporate, and I'll say my reminder again, the Florida League of Cities does not take a position on whether any community should or should not incorporate. We are here to make sure that the process itself is understood, to answer questions, to point you towards resources, but not to say you should or you shouldn't. There's no more personal decision than this for a community to decide, so it's completely your decision. The way prior to 1974 was that the community got together, drafted its own constitution, which we call a charter. Charter is Latin for contract. The people adopted it, and you were incorporated. You didn't go to the legislature. What happened with the 70s is the legislature, remember Florida's growth was exponential World War II onward, right? And they said, you know what, we've got to have a better process because we've got folks that are incorporating that didn't even draw the map right. They've drawn in a piece of another city and you can't do that. That's already, there's got to be a process. So in 74, they put together a statute, Chapter 165, Florida statute, and in it they put 2 tiers. One, the legislature is interested in your viability and your procedure. When they vote to approve the special act, they are not creating a new municipality. They are allowing the vote to occur at home by having said that we vetted this document and this process, and we believe that the area in question is viable. And since 74, that's been the process. Now, if you've ever lived in Miami-Dade, it's completely different there because their county charter is in the Florida Constitution, so they don't abide by Chapter 165 of state statute. They go through a county-driven process to incorporate, and it's worked for them because they have 34 municipalities. So, very busy in Miami-Dade. For the rest of the state, this 2-tier process, in the 70s, we hardly had any incorporation even studies. In the 80s, there were 5 new municipalities created, roughly. But in the 90s, it really took off. And in my time at the League, there have been 26 incorporations, mostly the 90s and the early 2000s, largely because these communities wanted to write their own comprehensive plans, which is the land use document and 20-year vision for an area through which they could be separate and apart from their county's comprehensive plan for their area. Land use was the single biggest reason for those incorporations. For a handful of the cities, though, it was driven by water, wastewater issues because they were in an area no one could serve. And by incorporating, they could create a water system, a wastewater system, stormwater, what have you, because they were in an area that did not have one. So sometimes the issue is service delivery. Largely in what I'm going to call a more modern era, it's largely been driven by comprehensive planning, land use, and then ultimately locally, that local body's decisions related to zoning and density. The feasibility study requirement is one of the biggest steps for a community. You all discussed that and worked on it after 2018 when I was down here. And what it proves in a 5-year budget is not only the viability question, but an even larger intergovernmental question, which is who's going to provide what services, when, and how. That document is where the legislature really dives in, House first, Senate second. If the House finds anything in it that causes them concern, heartburn, worry, they work with the community group that filed it. They ask all the questions on the House side. If and when it leaves the House and goes to the Senate, it is considered the formality step because all the due diligence is done in the House. And it is your House member, because it is a local bill or a special act, the House member drives this train. It is the House member's job to make sure it is scheduled, heard, discussed, vetted, and then voted on. And then it goes over to the Senate. So House, critically important. Once these two bodies hear it, and if it passes both bodies, it goes to the governor for signature, it comes home, and the community group gets ready and does a public education campaign ahead of the yes-no question for incorporation that is on a ballot. Shall the community of Sunshine Beach be incorporated? Yes or no? Sunshine Beach, by the way, no such place anywhere in Florida. It's mine. I own it. Someday I will live there. But I just use it because it's mythical, okay? And I can't believe in the Sunshine State we don't have anywhere in Florida called Sunshine Beach. So it's mine. Anyway, that yes-no question is expected to pass in law, simple majority, so 50% plus one. If the vote fails, the group can try again. There's no limit on the number of times you can go back. You can wear out the goodwill of a voter. Sometimes that happens. Deltona tried 8 times. Long process, almost 20 years. Marco Island tried a number of times. Other communities have tried once, walked away, and never talked about it again. Okay, but we're at 411 because there was enough of a desire in those particular communities to go forward. Now, the 411 for the large part, though, didn't go through this process. In a modern era, you're looking at probably 35 efforts since the law changed, okay? So the study's timetable, every August 31st, if there's going to be a study considered for the next year, the deadline is the Friday before Labor Day. So given whenever that's going to fall calendar-wise, I usually tell people you got to turn it in the end of August. That is the special act, the draft charter, and the feasibility study. Those pieces together form the special act. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit about the process. Statistically, I get told all the time, they're too small, they can't be a city. Well, Marineland has 8. Now, yes, they incorporated well before 1974, but since 74, the only issue has been that if you're in a county with a larger or more suburban population of 500,000 or more, they want you to start with a threshold number. However, they've waived it numerous times. Both Loxahatchee Groves and Grant Valcaria were incorporated in 2006 with populations of less than 3,000 in counties of close to 1 million. And in the case of Palm Beach County, 1 million. So all the legislator who sponsors your bill has to do is request a waiver if the population and the population density don't match the guideline that's in statute. There's no minimum or maximum number. And I've given you the median already, so next slide. There is a question for services. Does every city start from scratch? No. A lot of cities form with the idea that they will contract with a neighboring city for something like police and fire, water and sewer, maybe garbage pickup, whatever they can piggyback onto. And that got nicknamed in the late 80s GovLight. Light beer, right? This is GovLight. You'll have a council and a commission. You have to have a clerk and an attorney, right? Beyond that, perhaps we will have, and what most of the municipalities have done is have a manager. That manager then negotiates and enforces every one of those contracts for services. Some cities have done a hybrid where there were 1 or 2 things they desperately wanted to do in-house, and they do them, and they contract for everything else. And we have a handful of cities that are genuine GovLight. I can also give you examples of cities that when from the start, they went ahead and did everything in-house because that's one of the reasons they incorporated. There wasn't anybody else that would serve them to the level that they wanted or that they could. So they do it all in-house. We've seen a variety. GovLite is a more popular notion these days, and certainly something that a lot of communities talk about, because the idea of it usually means you'd pay less in taxes, because you're not starting a police department from scratch, and you're not starting a fire department from scratch, where the expenses are really high on the infrastructure end. For a lot of the communities that just wanted to do a comp plan, they're 100% contractual, but they get to make their own land use decisions. So that's the reason they incorporated. Next slide, please. So the incorporation process, gosh, that slide ended up light. I hope it's darker there. Yes, it is. All right, I've described a little of this. Your delegation hears this first, and that is anyone who represents even a sliver of Lee, okay, in your case. All the House and all the Senate members meet a few times a year by delegation. They usually meet ahead of the session. Sometimes they meet mid-session at home. Sometimes they meet right after session. It depends. You need to know your local delegation's calendar, because they set the special act or special bill list. And if they're going to carry forward any local acts, meaning not a general law, state law, but a local bill, if they're going to carry any of them forward, then it would make sense. They have to hear it. Most groups use the early summer to make the presentation, knowing that the filing deadline is the end of August. With the delegation's support, then, it goes into the House process. There are hearings within the local government subcommittee of the House and Senate Community Affairs Committees. If it passes through the committee process, and as I said, passes through the House and the Senate, you're looking at a done deal then. The campaign at home, most communities will set up an organization to do lots of meetings. The way the law reads is that no government can spend public money to tell you to vote yes or no. You can have a website set up, but this group wouldn't be a government yet, it would be an association. The notion, though, is that you present all the information, you hold lots of forums, some people go door to door, it depends on the community. You might put a postcard together, do a direct mail piece, there's lots of options. But if this stage were reached, there's got to be a public education campaign that explains what the new municipality would mean, what it would do, how it would be governed, and what is the timetable ahead of the vote. Next slide, please. If this community were to go forward, the feasibility study that you've done obviously has to be updated. New data, new calculations. And the intergovernmental piece that I mentioned earlier is what is really critical. Who would provide what service, when, and how? It means sitting down with the sheriff and saying, this is what we currently receive. What would it take to do either more, the same? Usually most people don't want to go less, but these are what you talk through, right? There are schools in your area. Any local government in your area has to be met with, and you have to get a letter from them that says, we met, we talked. There might not be any impact for a new city with schools, for example. However, if a city is created, the school district is going to come to you and ask for crossing guards and the money to pay them, because all counties and cities share in that because the state doesn't fund it fully. That's an intergovernmental question that would come up. The water management district would need to know whether you're the water provider or not. They need to know the local governments in their area, as does every other special district here, whether that's a fire district, a hospital district, a library district, mosquito control. Every local government has to be met with. That's described in statute, and it becomes part of the feasibility study that's turned into the state. The 5-year budget is the other big piece to this that scares most people, right? And the question I usually get right away is, can you tell me exactly what it's going to cost me as a business owner or a homeowner? No. All you can do with the plan is look at the budgets that get put together, get a rough estimate as to whether it would cost you additionally in either fees or taxes, because until a city is created and until it has a city council or a city commission, whatever you choose to call them, they would be the ones to then put the fiscal discussion into action. And so saying we think it might be 1 mil of property tax or 1.5 mils of property tax to do this until there is a city council that actually goes about that process. It's premature to say exactly this is what it will cost me. But no government is free. All governments have expenses and costs. Just writing a comprehensive plan in this day and age is a couple $100,000. Okay, but it's a 20-year plan, and it's a huge investment for a community. So it usually comes with a cost because the expert you're bringing in to write it, or the planning firm that you're bringing in to write it, is bringing all of that depth and knowledge, et cetera, with them. One of the questions to ask yourself too, being post-hurricane, what is your tax base? There has been substantial damage, and I, along with the rest of Florida, we're all heartbroken for you. However, to get to the brass level of what are the numbers, your property appraiser and your tax collector are just coming to terms with how big this impact has been. If you were to continue talking about incorporation, that would be one of the first meetings to sit down and have, is for the map that we're proposing, what is the tax base? Because the legislature pays extremely close attention to that part of it. Next slide, please. Service delivery, I've already talked a little bit about. You have up to 2 years, by the way, once incorporated, to write that comprehensive plan. They give you a good amount of time. It is reviewed by the state. There is a sort of vetting process with Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, DEO, reviews all county and all municipal plans. And a planning, yeah. So for law enforcement, you've got a question related to the sheriff. You are in a fire district. That largely does not change with municipal incorporation. Next slide, please. So the hardest part of the study, you've already talked a little bit about boundaries if you wanted to pursue it. I want to take a minute though. The legislature in the last 15 years has wanted to see a balance of commercial and residential. The last 100% all residential community to incorporate, right? That's not a very varied tax base. And putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, the legislature's worried about that. They want to know that in addition to residential, that there's commercial, okay? They look for that balance. The fiscal structure, gov-lite or not, what would this community be providing, and what are the rough ideas on what it would cost? The hard part too here, working in a political environment, your county commission is obviously supplying most of this data, and they know that you're working on it. The lines of communication need to be really open. It's not like you can hide and say you're not doing it when you're talking to county staff and asking them questions and asking them for data and information, and keeping your county commissioner informed is a big part of this, as well as everybody in the intergovernmental pool. And we'll talk politically a little bit about the state in just a minute, but that's the other part of this that's intensely political. Next slide, please. The communicating with citizens used to come up before websites. How am I going to ever find information on this? And I'd see people stand in the library and try and catch people to talk to them. Publix, parking lot, you know, popular places like that. Nowadays with a website, if you build a quality website, all the information can be on it. Having what's called an FAQ, a frequently asked questions section, is very much advised. What is the timetable? From the start of the feasibility study to filing the bill is rarely shorter than 6 months. It's usually a year or a little more than a year. The entire process, sometimes between 2 to 3 years. In part because the legislature's timetable is exact and they don't make exceptions to it. And if you don't get heard in a given year, are you going to then try and come back in a new year? When you return, by the way, if that were to occur, you have to update the study and provide new numbers. Next slide, please. So the charter, I'll just take a quick minute and say these are short documents. The charter is a broad framework like the US Constitution. The details for any city live in its ordinances. But the charter tells you who the elected body is going to be. It tells you the form of government. and it establishes the checks and balances between what is legislative and what is administrative. So it's a critically important document. I know the slide is hard to see, but I've got 2 resources there. Most people go to charters they like, cut and paste. Nobody hardly starts from scratch anymore. We go from the ones that, based on the form of government you pick that. Next slide, please. Okay, the legislative part of the information, there is the committee. I've shared the different information as far as the House side. Let's go on to the next slide. Pros and cons. Wanting to be at the table when the county meets and having a unified collective voice is a pro. The con is it comes with a cost. There, to form a municipality and do the study is just one part of it. To actually self-govern and run a city comes with a financial cost and also a cost of time, because the people who will lead it are the community leaders that have risen up, usually within the process itself. They have to commit to then running and serving on that initial city council and the city councils to come. So there is a big commitment that has to be made. It isn't just financial, it's also time. The service delivery question and the negotiating of contracts has been pretty well done in Florida, but does the county have to say yes to you? No. So you can look at neighboring cities to provide certain services. There are ways to look at privatized services for some of it, but not all of it. It's all the way that you look at it, though, do know that a county can sit across it from you at a negotiating table and say, for what you're asking, our answer is no. And good luck finding it somewhere else, because the county does not have to do what a city tells it to do. There are some alternatives to talk about with the county if it is service delivery issues you're worried about. Talking with your county commissioner, himself or herself, about the things that are most important to you. There is the ability to set up certain districts for what is called an MSTU, a Municipal Services Taxing Unit, an MSBU, a Municipal Services Benefit Unit, where an area can keep the money that it raises and spend it there for a specific service if that's what's desired. There are communities that have convinced their county commission to put a development overlay on an area in order to help stop rampant development or to lessen it. Density restrictions, etc. Of course, that means that the county commission agrees. That can be part of the hurdle getting there. You might have one county commissioner or even 2 that agree with you. Does the entire county commission agree? Maybe not. However, these are often looked at as alternatives to incorporating, because incorporating is a very big deal. Next slide, please. So I wanted you to just have the list of who's recently tried it. There have been folks that have gotten all the way to the ballot, like Hobe Sound, and it failed. Their county actually came up and lobbied for it. They wanted the city to be created. The voters chose not to. Okay? I don't know whether Hobe Sound will try again, but that's an example of one where they did every single step, worked 2 years on the process, and it failed. Indiantown is still our newest municipality, 2017. Next slide, please. One of the other things that usually gets asked is, what else could happen to us? Could we be forced to annex? Annexations with a population require a referenda, and it has to pass in the community going in, and it has to pass in the city taking it in. It's a dual referenda requirement under state law. When land is undeveloped, it's a one-way process because there's no one there to vote. But when there is a population, you can't be taken. If all of your folks voted yes to go into City of Sunshine Beach, then that's different. That is a legal annexation. But you cannot be taken. And I think it's important to understand that under Florida law. This was written the same year as the incorporation process, 1974, and they put the dual referenda in there so that people had to vote to come in and that city had to vote to bring them in. However, if there were a city you wanted to be part of and you were contiguous, for some communities that's a really good conversation. I've mentioned the MSTU and the MSBU. Let's keep going. Next slide, please. Okay. The political reality of what we're in. The Florida legislature has not made municipal incorporation a priority in the last 5 to 7 years. It is the House Speaker's prerogative to schedule where bills go. In that process for the local bills, then that chair has the discretion to schedule as well. Siesta Key has tried twice and has not been able to get it brought back home. Perdido, up in Escambia, way up almost to the Alabama border, they wanted to try for this year. They're arguing right now with their House member who said he'd sponsor it. Now he's not sure. They have until January 8th, the day session starts. They are filed, but they don't know that they have the full delegation support right now. They're trying. Those are the two that are in contention. There are several other communities that are studying this. However, they've been told by their House and or Senate members that the support is not there and to maybe wait a year or wait 2 years. So the notion of when the legislature makes something a priority on the local bill calendar, I'm not talking about general law, on the local bill calendar, that's why your delegation is so critical if, and it's a huge if you choose to pursue this. You have to know that your delegation will go to the mat for you because it is not the most open of political climates in Tallahassee for this issue, okay? That's where incorporation lives. As far as looking at those other alternatives, those discussions with your own county commission, only you can know if the time is right to do that or not, or to, continue to hold public forums and discuss what some of the other options are. That's part of the intergovernmental discussion. The issues for home rule are very serious for counties and for municipalities. We are looking for an instance just on the issues of the decisions that have been made related to comp plans and development orders with what happened in both 2022 and last year. Yes, that is a preemption of local authority. And it was the Senate president's top issue, and any Senate president is going to get their wish list. Same with the House Speaker, they get their wish list. When these folks are coming into office and you're looking at everybody that's running for 2024, find out how they feel about home rule. Talk to them about local decisions locally made versus one size fits all coming out of Tallahassee. I offer that up as food for thought. There are organizations out there that work on that issue, as does the Florida League of Cities, the Florida Association of Counties. It's a group called Local Voices United right now that's talking a lot about home rule. So if you'd like, I can share their information. But it is very concerning that in this climate, we sometimes are finding that the local decision authority is not resting with the city and the county and is instead being preempted. So I did want to touch on that. I've walked you through a lot of information, and I did it rapidly because I know your time is very valuable. I would now like to take questions, and so the microphone is there in the back. Don't leave me standing. Westlake was not an incorporation. So somebody just asked me about Westlake. Westlake is in Palm Beach County, and they were an improvement district. Improvement districts have an option under state law to do what's called a municipal conversion. Conversion is different than incorporation, but it only applies to improvement districts. So thank you for asking that question. Yes, sir.
Yes, if we were to incorporate, what happens to the existing land use plans? Can they be negated? And if so, are you open to lawsuits?
Anybody can sue on any given day, so
Right.
The answer to that piece of it is always the option for lawsuits. Within the 2 years it takes for a new municipality to write its comprehensive plan and then in time to adopt its own land use ordinances, the ordinances in place stand. It's additionally in state law that development orders already in existence within an area cannot be changed by a new municipality. Only the county that creates them has the ability to alter them. But that's at the development order level. That's not at just, mass plans or speculation. Yes, sir.
Two questions. Number one, can we skip the incorporation and just become a county?
Let me tell you what that process is, and then we'll get to your second question.
Okay.
To form a county can only be done through the Florida legislature. We have not had a new county created in Florida since 1925. All of the efforts that have been made during 1925 to today have not made it out of committee, and the legislature has said no to each one because of the infrastructure required to create 5 new constitutional offices. In addition, it is the dividing up of the current county and its political capital that the legislature does not want to touch. So the last effort was Hialeah trying to secede from Miami-Dade County in the year 2000. None have been filed since that time. You can find a House or Senate member to file it, but it has not been successful since 1925.
Okay.
Second question.
Second question is home rule. It looks like the state is usurping the local home rule.
The preemption issue that I mentioned, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So is that going to continue in your view, or?
Every city right now in the areas where they are not preempted will tell you, and every county the same, that it is their most precious authority because they don't have to go get permission to do stop signs at a corner, to change the way they do a particular fire service, etc. It is a very precious authority. Where it is being preempted has largely been driven by special interest groups. And so the issue is going to be that up against the leaders within the state government.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi there. First of all, thank you for coming
My pleasure.
and giving us all this information. It's very valuable. You talked about GovLite and it strikes me, at least in theory, as an easy way to incorporate yourself because you're just essentially peeling off those services and perhaps paying pretty much the same amount. But I'm wondering, have you ever in your experience seen towns, municipalities that go down that road and then find themselves being squeezed by the larger municipalities that they left?
Well, you don't leave a municipality to form a new municipality. It's unincorporated county
I'm
forming
sorry.
a new
Yes,
city.
you're right.
It's the question of perhaps the county started off on page 1 with them. 5 years later, the county came back and said, this price is now going to be this. And so to that municipality, what had been a light hit on the budget becomes a heavier hit because the county's needs have changed, okay? Or a different sheriff came in and said, I have a different structure and process. There have been municipalities that have found that their expenses went up not in the proportion they expected because as they went through their contract negotiations, things were more expensive than they expected. Yes, I think that's very true. If you look at DeBerry, Fort Myers Beach, and Weston, they are probably the 3 true GovLite non-hybrids. They've been able to maintain a smaller size. They have not been able to stay at their original incorporation budgets, though, because all of their services have increased in time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again, and thank you, like my friend here just said, for coming in and
My pleasure.
speaking tonight. I just had a couple of questions. The first one was a cost for feasibility. Did you give me a number, or did you mention a number?
It's been as low as maybe 20,000 for a study and as high as 75,000, depending upon what a local community group has chosen to do on its own versus what they asked the consultant to do.
Is it
So
a
if
law
I
firm?
gave you that range,
Okay, is it
Yeah.
a law firm that does this, or, I mean, is there, are there
they're
special
a
groups?
combination. Usually the person in the firm has access to an attorney and access to a planner. They've largely come out of the finance side because the 5-year budget is so complicated to do. Estimating state revenue is a PhD program in and of itself. And I will just say that for the folks that are doing this level of consulting, they're mostly what I'm just going to call general governmental consulting firms.
Okay, second question. You mentioned that municipalities have a couple of different things. Like, one of them was, a question that I had was, are municipalities protected by the state in any way? In other words, if there is a question with regarding a suit like Bert Harris, and I think you're one of the earlier members.
Any local government can face a Bert Harris decision, a county or a municipality. The state does not provide protection from that.
Okay.
It's up to the individual municipality as it does its land use related actions to be mindful of Bert Harris as an act, yes.
Okay. You had also mentioned about land use control. What are some of the examples of how a municipality might control land use? What are some?
The designation of the category for the land is for the municipality to pick for what's within its boundaries.
Could you give me an example?
Commercial versus residential versus
okay.
industrial. And then within commercial, as you pick the categories, you set thresholds, you set density. Some cities go as far as putting like 1 unit per 5 acre into a residential area. That is a very rural designation. They don't then consider exceptions to it. Other communities have certain areas that are designated for what is rural versus what is perhaps a higher density. There can be height limits on buildings when you get into the actual land development code itself. There can be protections for historic districts. There's a whole variety of things that a city can then control under the land use plan. Yep.
And there was one other question there. You had mentioned about the commercial versus the residential. About what percentage are they looking at for?
They're just looking for it to not be 100% one or the other.
One or the other.
They're
Okay.
looking for a blend.
So as long as there is some commercial
Well, and
development.
even that hasn't been enough of a guarantee to get heard, but it is one of the criteria on the list that they are looking for. Please don't view it as a standalone. It is part of a bigger picture.
Gotcha. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Yes, sir?
Thank you for being here, Lynn. You're a wealth of knowledge. I think everybody definitely appreciates you
Well,
being
thank you.
here. I'd like your personal opinion. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm sort of believing that most people are thinking about incorporation as slowing the growth of development in our space. And so with the land use plan that we developed ourselves, do we really have the ability to slow that growth down?
Not for what's already been approved by your county. What you are looking to is your future, yes, that would be. But within the time that you are still within the counties, in addition to what they've already approved, only the county can alter any of that. The new municipality cannot change a development order. Now, something that was just discussed and there is no development order,
Right.
the new municipality would absolutely be at the table for that decision. But if a DO is in place, a development order is in place, the new municipality cannot change that.
And the reality is, with the land use plan, you can still always be sued, right?
Everybody can be sued
Yeah.
any day in
Yeah.
Florida, yes.
Okay.
And I say that, I know it sounds flip, but it is reality. Yes, ma'am.
I just was wondering, are you aware of any case where an area has incorporated where property taxes have not increased noticeably?
So Weston is the example that's usually given, and Broward is where Weston is located. Broward has a number of taxes from the county to the unincorporated areas that when Weston did their budget, they did not have to raise the property tax as a city because what changed from having been county to what was now city ended up a wash. Now, it's been 25 years since they incorporated. Weston has chosen to do certain things related to ad valorem on their own, but when they incorporated, what an individual homeowner paid did not change. That's what's called a wash, okay? Are there hundreds of examples of that beyond Weston? In certain areas, yes, but for an entire city, citywide, not necessarily. It depends on whether there was an MSTU, a Municipal Services Taxing Unit, in place in that area or not. But there are examples where the wash occurred, and Weston's always my best example to give.
Thank you.
Now, property values are different than property tax. Just coming into a municipality, That's not so much the valuation of it, it's related more to the tax. So I just wanted to be clear.
I was thinking in terms of millage rate.
Right, millage rates, right. There are 22, I think, this year municipalities that don't use ad valorem at all. They don't use the property tax. They live completely off of fees. That's because they're largely condo-based communities, okay? They've been able to do things through the utility tax and the state sales tax portion that comes to them through state shared revenues, and they choose not to do ad valorem. So when you pull that data from Department of Revenue, it's important to know that they're out there. The smallest of them is at about 12,000 population, okay? I will also say none of these have police or fire, which are two of the most expensive things that a municipality can do, okay? Yes, sir.
Good evening. First of all, I wanted to talk, I know I've heard before, I didn't know if this was true or not. If we were to incorporate, could we, what's the word I'm looking for? Devour, I guess is a poor word. But the fire district that we have, would that be able to blend into the new city, or would that remain independent?
My
Along
understanding,
with their budget.
and I am not a lawyer, I am not a lawyer, I am not a lawyer. I don't believe incorporation usually changes the service agreements that are in place with fire districts. If over time a new city wanted to take on that fire service, they would have to then negotiate it. But most fire districts were legislatively created and were created with their own boards and their own funding mechanisms. So coming up against that, again, not being a lawyer, it isn't that it's impossible. I will tell you it's rarely done in the incorporations that we've seen, in large part because most of the newer cities that have incorporated have also not wanted to take on that expense.
Well, I think for us, we look at the surplus that our fire department has. I think it's pretty large. Last I checked, it was like 4 million.
But I would
And
imagine
I think
that
people
that
have
is.
looked at that and said, oh, we can take that, and I don't think that's the case.
The taking part of it, no.
All right, the other question I had, I'm gonna let her go, and I'm gonna remember it. Go ahead. I don't remember what I was gonna ask.
That's okay, you can come back. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, it got warm in here, or is it just me?
No, it's not
Okay.
you. It's not just you. An observation on your presentation for the time commitment, which would clearly be the upfront investment of time by interested parties, but a reinforcement that it doesn't stop there.
Oh, no,
It
that's
is-
the beginning.
It is the beginning. And I would just like to share with many in this room on boards that I have served, it is like pulling teeth to get people to step up to the plate and run and participate and be accountable. And I'm concerned that that ability in our community may not be there. Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing those remarks. One of the things I did not mention is that cities once made can dissolve. And we had in 2018, Hastings up in St. Johns County made the decision to dissolve at a population of 850. They had not been able to sit a full council, to your point, for almost 10 years. And their hands were tied because they'd get 3 in office and then somebody'd move away or whatever the case, and they couldn't even have a quorum to do the necessary state documents that you have to file every year. They had literally gone door to door and could not find 5 people to serve. When they held their vote to dissolve and put it on the ballot, which is what you do, just as you vote to incorporate, you vote to dissolve, only 150 people came out and voted that day. So it's a very harsh reality for them, but you cannot dissolve if you have debt. And so I share that because it's important that you know it. If you've built a wastewater treatment plant or something and you owe 30 million in debt, it's not like the county says, shoot, we'll just come in and take over those payments for you. No, you cannot dissolve until debt is resolved. Yes, sir, you thought of your question.
I got it.
Okay.
And part of this you may not be able to answer, and that's okay. You seem really smart, so I'm gonna shoot it from the hip anyway.
Okay.
The road coming in is a state-controlled road, right? The young man mentioned that a lot of people are worried about development, and I understand that. The question would be, as a city, would the control of that road change over if we were to incorporate? Because I know that the traffic is a big deal, and some people may say, oh, well, if we incorporate, we can control the width of the road.
The road itself might be in state ownership. If you were a municipality, you would have a seat at the table when decisions are discussed for things like the speed limit, any widenings, et cetera, along with the county and the TPA, or Transportation Planning Agency, for the area. Not being a municipality, right now, you don't have that voice. The state, about every decade, renegotiates what is state road and what is county road. In time, changes do get made, but not always, in terms of whose road it is. There have been state roads that were turned into county roads, and there have been county roads that were taken over by the state, okay? For a municipality to take a road on, it is usually the roads within the municipality that are wholly contained and public, not private. So that's a little of that answer. I am not the transportation expert that others in the room, and so did I answer that right? Okay, thank you. It was pretty good. Okay, thank you. Other questions? You feel like you're ready for Jeopardy? If there was a category on, you could raise your hand and jump in a little bit. I don't pretend in any way to have answered some of your deeper questions, because you are the only ones collectively that can do that. The Florida League of Cities is a resource for pointing you towards experts and people that have done this before, and I'm happy to do that piece of it. I want to leave by just wishing you great success with your conversations, because that's really where all of this is. There is no one way alone. It's usually a multitude of the ways together. And in 32 years of working at the League, getting to meet with groups like this has been very meaningful for me, because I get to see the issues that matter most to real Floridians. And so I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'll stick around a little bit if there's an additional question or whatever, but where did she go? Deborah, do you want to, oh, she's behind me. You stood there the whole time? No, okay. Can you say, you didn't walk right by me and I missed you. Anyway, I will go ahead and turn this off and turn it back over to you. Thank you all very much.
I definitely want to thank you for coming out. Does anybody have that answer? I have a yeah, I think we have part-time, not full-time people. Oh, the question was how many, what is the population of Pine Island?
Lynn actually has that number, I think.
Oh, good.
I thought I was done. No. The 2020 census says that Pine Island Center, 1,870, St. James City, 3,900, Bokeelia, 1,330, Matlacha, 851, and Matlacha Shores, 354. By my math, it's slightly a little over 5,000, but that would be assuming it was all of it together, so just maybe about 5,100. But that's 2020. Thank you, Lynn. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Okay. Well, I would thank all of you for coming out tonight and listening to the conversation, and we will have our next meeting on November, excuse me. So the question was about the GPICA lock. Yeah. We have the right person here. Is this Sue?
I can speak to that. I've been pretty involved. I'm Sue DeHote. I'm a member of the board here. And I'm also working with the attorneys that have filed for the petitioners. Does everybody understand what that question is about what's going on with the GPICA lock? Do you know what that means? Do I need to do any background? Yes. Okay. So the Chiquita Lock is a lock just like on the Panama Canal, only it controls the flow of boats out of the southwest spreader canal, which is on the southwest end of Cape Coral. And it was the system of canals and spreader canals was originally designed to have a little bit higher water level on the whole west side of Cape Coral, which would force water through the mangroves when it rains hard, rather than flowing right out through the main north-south canal. So the lock was really there to keep the water level just a little higher on the inside, it's not really fresh water because there's some little streams that connect between the mangroves and the canal that goes along the west side. But the bottom line is the city of Cape Coral has asked to remove the lock. And so they did this once before. They did this in about 2017, 2018. So they've done it again. And they've requested a permit from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to take out the lock. They've claimed a lot of reasons that have to do with potentially killing manatees when the lock opens and closes, that the law enforcement that does water rescues can't get up through that lock as fast as they'd like to. They talk about boater safety with people that have to line up and wait for the lock when it's busy. And then I think it really wasn't mentioned explicitly, but Hurricane Ian destroyed the electronics of the lock, so it doesn't work right now. So they just don't want to replace it. So bottom line is that request by the city to take out the lock was made to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. They have to issue a permit to do it. So the FDEP reviewed all the information supplied by Cape Coral and said, yes, we will grant the permit. And there were a number of people from Pine Island and Matlacha, as well as Cape Coral, who thought that wasn't a really good idea because there was a reason the lock was put in the first place, and it was largely environmental to prevent the mangroves from dying if the water level went down, prevent silting. So there were reasons that we didn't think that was a good idea. So 3 individuals, initially this particular suit had 3 organizations and 4 individuals who were what they call petitioners. So they were the people that objected to the granting of the permit. 3 of those organizations have dropped out for reasons related to potential risk of having to pay large sums of money. And it was a bit of intimidation, but basically Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, Matlacha Civic Association, and Calusa Waterkeeper all dropped out of the suit, as well as 1 individual who happened to be Mike Hannon's wife. Mike Hannon is the attorney in Matlacha who is co-counsel. He's one of the major, he's basically driving the case. He's also hired another attorney who has a bar license in Florida, who we are paying. That's where we're paying the money to. His name is John Thomas. And so those 2 are really the only attorneys on the case. And so at this point, the hearings, there's a lot of preliminary work and depositions and witnesses and experts and all that stuff. The case hearing goes before an administrative law judge, which is just the type of case it is. So the city of Cape Coral has its own attorneys. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection has its attorneys. And then we have our 2 attorneys, the petitioners. The current petitioners are 3, call them the 3 fishermen. 3 men from Cape Coral are still in the suit. So the 3 fishermen are still there, and the hearing started last Wednesday. The court failed to take into account the request that the petitioners had to have accommodations for one of our co-counsel who is hearing impaired. And because he couldn't hear, So the case started and one of our two attorneys couldn't hear. So there was a request to remediate that. And the judge basically kicked it back to the attorneys to find a place to have the hearing. And it turned out there weren't any available places in Lee County. It was first going to be in Venice, in Sarasota County, and then it turns out that particular hearing room didn't have the right that courtroom didn't have the right sound system. So now it's in downtown Sarasota. So it was delayed about a day and a half. So our folks have to either drive back and forth or have gotten motel rooms up in Sarasota. And so we currently, so the first, I can say that the first parts of the case, the city of Cape Coral went first. They called their witnesses. The FDEP went second, and I think they only had one witness. And as of today, Mike Hannon has called two people for the petitioners. Casey Streeter testified today. He's the owner of Island Seafood. And Nancy Hindenraw, who lives in Matlacha, both testified about their experiences with water quality in the Matlacha area, primarily as a consequence of taking out the CETUS barrier, which was a similar water barrier or barrier to flow in the North Spreader Canal system. That was taken out in 2008. What does it say in it? Right. So the situation is that it's a David and Goliath. The city of Cape Coral has pretty much unlimited budget, and they've spent a lot of money on experts and engineering reports and computer models and more experts. And we have our ragtag crew of volunteers and the funding that is provided by you folks in terms of paying our co-counsel, John Thomas. Can you come up to I think there's a mic still there. You can't hear me? I'm doing pretty loud. Well, I think we're doing this online still, right?
Yeah, the live
All right,
stream.
so two questions, well, one's a question, one's kind of a statement to add to what you said. One is the groups that dropped out, like the Civic Association, Matlacha, and the Waterkeeper. It's my understanding that they're still contributing financially to the cost.
That's true. They dropped out of the legal case.
Dropped their names off, but they're still helping out. The other thing that I think it's important to mention whenever we talk about this is that Cape Coral has other options. They could very easily replace the lock with a high-speed lock, but that costs money. And so instead of spending the money, they just want to remove it. And I think we all forget about that, but it's important to point out that they're cheapskates who really just don't care about the water quality.
I'm not gonna opine on that because I might be a witness either tomorrow or Friday. But in general, there are other, there are multiple ways to solve a problem. Cape Coral has decided they want to solve it by taking out a structure that was originally designed for a reason. And they've convinced the FDEP that it's okay to do what they plan to do. I do want to also say that this suit it's a hearing, and anybody can attend via Zoom. The link to the Zoom link is on the GPICA website. So you can, if you want, I think, is it on the website or we just sent out the letter? The Zoom link for the hearing? It's in the emails. It's on the website. Okay, so it's I think a 9-digit number and a Zoom link, and you can. And we've been asking folks, particularly from the petitioner side, to listen in. You want to mute yourself and turn off your camera, but you can listen to the proceedings, and it starts at 8:30 every morning through this week, and ends at 5 o'clock. So. It's an all-day deal. There's usually about a 45-minute lunch break. But you can tune in and hear what's going on. And we'd ask you to do that because we want people to participate and see what's happening.
Sue, do you know how much longer these will be happening? A couple more days?
As of today, the judge, it was supposed to end Thursday, And because of the delays and other issues, it's currently scheduled out through Friday. The judge has an issue on Thursday, so it's going to end at 1:00 p.m. on Thursday. She has stated that anything beyond Friday will happen exclusively on Zoom. So it depends on how things wind up on Friday.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, sir. Do you have a question?
I do. I just have two items, just different subjects, but I was just wondering, at the last meeting, we were talking about the development, the two new developments, and it was stated that if you could write a letter to the development for Lee County and you have to go searching and blah, blah, blah. And I started to sift through and I just couldn't find the proper people to send an email to. And I was just thinking you would get so much more response if someone who had the knowledge and had written a letter, if they could put that on the website and people could use that as a structure to write their own letter and all the addresses would be there, boom, boom, you'd get so many more responses because I just gave up. It was just too hard to slog through this website and find where the heck and who am I supposed to send this to. So that's just one of my concerns. And another item, I was in the Pine Island Eagle, the gentleman who's proposing the service for the parking lot at Maria and Stringfellow wrote a letter. Did you see that?
I'm aware you wrote it. I have not.
And he did not at all disclose the fact that they are seeking a zoning change. He never mentioned, all we want to do is supply this, and I'm just wondering, I'm not real great at letter writing, but I think his letter should be replied to in the next Eagle so that people know that he wants a zoning change. So if someone wants to give me more facts, I'll write a letter, but if someone who knows all the facts could write a letter, that would be so great, because he shouldn't be able to get away with that. He was not disclosing.
Let's talk afterwards.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I believe it was 5 to 7 on Thursdays, the Pine Island meeting regarding the stoplight. Okay, if we don't have any other questions at this time, do we have a motion to adjourn? Second, thank you. And aye? Nay? All right. Thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see y'all at a Happy New Year. Yeah, and thank you for coming, for sure.
Yeah.